Hey, tonight we slip into the velvet-lined corridors of a palace where the candlelight flickers, not just with romance or royal splendor, but with secrets long shadows stretching toward treason, whispers wrapped in silken sleeves, and faces that smile too quickly. It's Queen Elizabeth I's court, dazzling from a distance, but up close. It's a dangerous game board, and you, tonight, are caught in its middle. You'll meet spies, traitors, queens, and executioners and trust. Me, you probably won't survive this, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Drop a comment telling us your location and local time. We love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the worn stone steps of Whitehall Palace. Outside, trumpets blare and banners snap in the wind. London is buzzing, and the Queen is entertaining foreign envoys again. But inside, the air turns heavier, thicker. The velvet curtains are too still, the courtiers too polished. You're not alone. You pass a girl no older than 14, her gown far too rich for her age, eyes scanning every face she passes. Is she just a noble's daughter, or something else entirely? This is the stage of Queen Elizabeth I, and while she smiles in gold and jewels, her court is more theatre than monarchy. Everyone has a role, everyone is being watched, including you. There are no CCTV cameras, of course, but there's something worse: gossip, servants, diplomats who pretend they don't understand English, but do. And Elizabeth's own obsession with knowing everything. She has to. She's unmarried, childless, and surrounded by men who want her gone, many of whom have crowns or armies, and yet she rules. Alone, it didn't happen by chance. Behind the makeup and poetry is steel. She's already survived being declared illegitimate, imprisoned in the Tower of London, nearly executed under her sister. She knows how fast favor turns into a noose, so now she trusts almost no one. But she does have one edge, a secret weapon hiding in plain sight. Or rather, a whole network of them. Spies, informers, cipher breakers, seductresses, and tonight, your first glimpse of it starts not with a dagger, but a dance. The court's evening masque is in full swing. You stand beneath painted ceilings as costumed dancers spin. One of them masked, clad in navy silk, glides past Elizabeth and then past you. He whispers only one word: France. Nobody else notices, but Elizabeth's eye flickers ever so slightly toward her secretary. Seated beside her with ink-stained fingers and a face like a coffin lid, Francis Walsingham. His name hasn't yet filled the dreams of every foreign ambassador. Not yet, but already people are uneasy. He barely speaks in public. He records everything. And people who make too much noise in his direction tend to disappear, or end up somewhere less pleasant, and Walsingham is not alone. Elizabeth has begun building something new, something no monarch of England has ever truly possessed. An invisible court, a second layer beneath the crown and the courtly dances. Already, foreign visitors are intercepted the moment they arrive. In Dover, their letters steamed open, recopied, resealed, their innkeepers bribed, their accidental dining companions memorizing their every word. One French envoy will later swear that the English knew he had syphilis before he even finished. Customs. It is a nation of spies, he mutters. He's not wrong. Still, Elizabeth knows this isn't enough. Treason comes from within, and it wears silk stockings. That's why, tonight, As you wander down a corridor toward the kitchens in search of something sweet, you find something bitter instead. Two servants arguing in urgent whispers. They don't see you, but you hear them. She's meeting him again, the old fountain. She thinks no one knows. She's a fool. The Queen will have her hanged by summer. You step back into the shadows. They're speaking of one of Elizabeth's ladies-in-waiting, and the man, no one dares name him, but the tone is unmistakable, dangerous romance, forbidden meetings. In a court like this, love isn't sweet, it's political, it's espionage, it's often fatal. One of the strange truths of Elizabeth's reign is that even the most personal things become weapons. Her own virginity is a political tool. She allows suitors to think they might win her, but never lets them too close. Each flirtation becomes a diplomatic move, and every move must be tracked. You return to the great hall just in time to see Elizabeth herself rise. She's in her mid-30s now, glowing with careful power. She holds herself like a woman used to being stared at and feared. The courtiers bow. The music fades. England, she says, with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, will not fall because of loud enemies, but silent ones. They require special care. A few laugh. Most don't. One scholar will later write that Elizabeth did not rule by love, nor by fear, but by the unbearable tension between the two. And maybe that's true, because in this court, people aren't just afraid of offending her, they're terrified of not knowing what she already knows, and she knows plenty. The man with the navy mask, gone. A coded letter will be found in his boot when he's arrested 2 days later. The lady-in-waiting meeting someone by the fountain, banished, in disgrace, though no reason is ever publicly given. The two gossiping servants. One is promoted, the other disappears. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth ordered these moves directly, or whether her web of informants began to act independently, protecting her image without her needing to lift a finger. Either way, a chill settles over. You begin to understand something unnerving. In this golden palace, the most dangerous weapon isn't a sword or even a crown. It's a secret. You rise early, rubbing your eyes as London fog creeps over the palace walls. But the Queen's secretary has already been awake for hours. Francis Walsingham, lean and spectral, stands by the window of his modest chamber, not a room for luxury, but for war. His battlefield, however, is parchment and ink. This man is no James Bond. He doesn't wield daggers or swing from tapestries. He studies, he listens, he waits. And slowly, he builds something extraordinary, an intelligence system unlike anything the English crown has ever seen. You wouldn't notice Walsingham if you passed him in the hall. That's the point. His face is forgettable, like a portrait someone tried to erase. His voice is dry, his humor is sharp and rarely shared, but his mind, it's lethal. He started life as a scholar, a Protestant exile during the Catholic reign of Mary, the first, watching friends burned alive for their faith tends to leave a mark. Walsingham returns to Elizabeth's court with one mission: to stop that ever happening again. And he believes the best way to do it is to know everything. At first, he simply listens. He cultivates a network of informers, secretaries, stable boys, mistresses, debtors. He builds relationships with London's printers and booksellers, monitoring every pamphlet and whispered rumor. He quietly funds the careers of foreign merchants who are happy to trade more than silk and spice. He places Protestant students in Jesuit schools overseas. They don't even realize they're spies until it's too late. You watch as he recruits Thomas Philippes, a soft-spoken genius with a love for mathematics and mischief. Together, they start what you might call the Elizabethan NSA, but without the electricity. Philippes becomes Walsingham's chief codebreaker. His handwriting is flawless, his Latin impeccable. He can forge any seal, mimic any signature, break even the most complex cipher with frightening speed, and he's not alone. Walsingham begins hiring men with strange talents, polyglots, artists, actors, herbalists, even retired pirates. Each has a role to play. Each is paid in coin, or protection, or quiet pardons. You're surprised how many people will sell there. Loyalty for a warm bed and a full stomach. Soon, England is blanketed in watchers. One fringe scholar will later joke that Walsingham put more eyes on England than God himself. And while that's probably heresy, it's not far off. In one smoky tavern, a toothless drunk sings Catholic hymns just a little too well. He's one of Walsingham's in a Cambridge classroom. A promising young student receives a scholarship. With invisible strings, he's now being groomed for field work, even at court. Several ladies' maids have been replaced. Quietly, no one asked where the others went. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth truly understood the full scale of the web Walsingham wove her, whether she preferred not to know. But she benefited from it. When one nobleman begins gathering weapons under the guise of hunting deer, a tip reaches Walsingham within 72 hours. When a foreign diplomat's servant goes missing, he reappears, curiously eager to cooperate with. Just enough leverage to ensure his discretion. You begin to notice strange patterns. At court, someone is always watching the watchman. Everyone smiles a little too brightly. And behind the grand politics wars, alliances, marriages, you can almost hear the creaking of the machinery Walsingham built. It's slow, subtle, relentless, still. It's not perfect. One night, you're in the study as Walsingham pores over intercepted letters from Italy. He's puzzled. Something doesn't fit. His fingers tap the desk, lips tight. Too careful, he mutters. It turns out to be the start of something enormous. But more on that later. Outside the palace, news travels faster than you'd expect. Spies pass messages stitched into shirt cuffs, tucked behind false heels, or hidden in caxius, really. One courier tries to eat the letter he's carrying when he's caught. Another hides his message inside a dead dog tossed into a ditch. There's even talk of ink that only appears when warmed by a candle. You stand in Walsingham, as study the first time he sees such a letter. The writing blooms like magic beneath the flame. He doesn't blink. Will need better heat. That's when you realize you're no longer in the court of queens and poets. You're in a war lab. A quirky but real fact. Walsingham kept records, so obsessively that some of his agents complained of being followed by other agents he had assigned to monitor them. It wasn't paranoia. It was policy. Some courtiers sneer behind his back, calling him Moorfield's mole. Others say he has no soul, only schemes. But still, they lower their voices when he passes. You trail him one day as he walks along the Thames. He pauses near a rotting pier, where a beggar waits with a tin cup. No coin changes hands, just a nod. Later, that same beggar is seen boarding a merchant ship bound for Spain. By now, you're beginning to feel it. That knot in your stomach, the weight of every whisper, the sense that one wrong glance, one misplaced letter, and you'd end up ... elsewhere. Walsingham is growing more powerful, but more isolated too. He trusts only a handful of people. His wife died years ago. His daughter is rarely seen. He doesn't dine, he doesn't dance, he reads, he writes, he watches, and Elizabeth, she lets him work in shadows, because he gives her light. In the end, what Walsingham is building isn't just a network, it's a system. One that will shape the very concept of national security. It's not glamorous, it's not even always legal, but it works, for now. Because while Walsingham's net is wide, something deadly is already slipping through the threads. Somewhere in England, coded letters are being smuggled past guards. Somewhere, someone is writing the Queen's name next to the word assassinate. You just don't know it yet. The morning smells of coal smoke and fresh ink. You trail close behind Thomas Phillips, now the man they call the Prince of Decoders, though he'd probably prefer modest scribe with a taste for secrets. He walks fast, always slightly hunched, as if protecting some invisible load on his back. Maybe it's the weight of every secret he's cracked, or every one he's helped fake. You descend into his workspace beneath Cecil Hauser, cramped, windowless chamber stuffed with scrolls, candles, half-empty bottles of acid, and what smells suspiciously like fish. Preservation technique, Philippe mutters, when he catches your nose wrinkling. The rats prefer clean parchment. Today, the cipher room is quieter than usual, though no less frantic. The latest intercepted letter lies open, ink barely dry, the paper wafered thin. Philippe holds it up to the candle. Nothing. Then he gently heats the parchment with a spoon above the flame. Words appear, faint, crooked, treasonous. Lemon juice, of course. An old trick butt in the right hands, devastating. You blink. The letter is signed with a simple flourish. Your devoted servant, Gilbert. No title, no surname, but the message is clear. He's writing to someone who already knows who he isn't what he's planning. In the margins, Philippe scrawls notes in his private shorthand. You can't read them, but they look like insects doing fencing. I've seen this hand before, he says softly. France, last winter, with ink from Spain. Spies, you realize, don't just chase men, they chase hands, strokes, the spacing between words. It's not what's written that matters, but how, where, when, and by whom. Historians still argue whether Philippe could identify forgeries just by smell or whether that story was a bit of Walsingham's flair for drama. But no one doubts his results. The man turns scattered correspondence into plots, motives, and, often, confessions. Not all the messages are hidden in ink. Some are baked into pies literally. One time, a pigeon tied with a strip of Latin code smacked straight into Walsingham's window. Even birds wanted to spill the beans. You trail Philippe to his next task, one far more dangerous than decoding. Forging it, not enough to intercept treason. Sometimes you have to invite it. In a shadowy corner of the chamber, he's crafting a reply in someone else's name, mimicking their handwriting, duplicating the slant, the loops, even the flourishes of vanity. You watch him add just one new phrase, small but crucial. A trap, yes, we agree, the Queen must die. Those words never came from the original author, but now they'll be used in court. You hesitate, this feels wrong, faking evidence. Philippe senses your discomfort. Would you rather wait until her head's rolling? He says, without looking up. It's a moral tightrope, and one that grows thinner each day. But to Walsingham's men, survival is the only virtue. The Queen lives, or England burns. That's the equation. Meanwhile, code is becoming its own language. Of war, You peek into a side room filled with books. A young man reads aloud phrases in Latin, French, Greek, then jots down numbers. Each word corresponds to a symbol. The system changes weekly, sometimes daily. Philippe flips through his notes and laughs under his breath. They've started using song lyrics again. Charming. You think about that, how treason could hide in a lullaby, a love poem, even a grocery list. Everything means something. The work is endless. A message from a nun in Calais reveals a hidden priest crossing into Kent. Another from a wool merchant details a shipment of pamphlets with anti-Elizabeth propaganda sewn into the linings of cloaks. A third, sent from a pastry chef in Brussels, reads like nonsense until the spacing of every third word reveals the phrase Silver Knife Coronation Day. It's terrifying and brilliant. Even the Queen is drawn into the process. Elizabeth is no idle monarch when it comes to intelligence. She wants to see the letters herself, not summaries, not reports. The letters, she reads them aloud sometimes. Voice steady, eyes blazing. "Let them come for me," she once whispered, after a night of reading traitorous plots. "They'll find England sharper than their daggers." You don't doubt her, but not all threats are foreign. That's where Robert Cecil comes in. Walsingham as protege, just beginning to make his mark. He's younger, more political, and perhaps more dangerous in the long run. While Walsingham builds webs, Cecil plans ladders. He's watching the future, and he doesn't entirely trust his teacher's methods. One afternoon, you see Cecil quietly, watching Philippe's at work. He says nothing, but his gaze lingers on the forged reply. Later that night, you hear him mutter, "We catch traitors by turning into them." You start to realize the spy game isn't just about protecting the Queen, it's about who controls the Queen after the dust settles. Still, for now, Walsingham reigns supreme in this underworld. His reach is growing, his reputation even more. So, in Venice, in Madrid, in Paris, his name is whispered like a ghost story. One ambassador writes home, "Do not trust your servants. Do not trust the walls. England hears everything. Even in your dreams now, you see letters floating in firelight, ink that disappears, words that beg for silence, and behind it all, a quiet scribe with tired eyes and a sharp quill, rewriting the fate of a kingdom one hidden message at a time. The knock at the old barn door is just 3 soft raps. You crouch in the rafters, hard hammering, as the farmer below reaches into a bale of hay and pulls out a carsack. No wheat, no livestock, just secrets. Tonight, you're deep in the English countryside, where the real war is being fought in whispers and cellar shadows. Welcome to the Jesuit Panica chapter of Elizabeth's reign, where faith becomes treason, and the price of loyalty is often death. The man stepping through the barn door isn't a smuggler or a thief. He's a Catholic priest, specifically a Jesuit, and he's being hunted. Since Elizabeth's excommunication by Pope Pius V in 1570, a papal bull declaring her illegitimate and urging Catholics to dethrone her, England has been in a state of spiritual paranoia. For Protestants, every mass held in secret feels like a spark to gunpowder. For Catholics, every prayer is a gamble with their lives. And Walsingham, he sees it as the perfect battlefield. Across the country, he dispatches agents to infiltrate Catholic safe houses, crack priest codes, and expose entire underground networks. You tag along with one such agent, disguised as a traveling cloth merchant, his real business unmasking the invisible clergy hiding in the rafters of England's country estates. He finds them in the oddest places, behind fake walls, under trap doors, in chapel ruins, even in hollowed-out chimneys. These priest holes are tiny, airless cavities where men crouch for hours, sometimes days, hoping not to cough or sneeze or die quietly. One such hiding place, designed by the brilliant Nicholas Owen, is so cleverly built into a staircase that it won't be found for centuries. Your shoulders itch just watching a man disappear into the floorboards. A quirky fact: Nicholas Owen, the master carpenter of concealment, was only about 5 feet tall, perfect for squeezing into tight spaces and for vanishing from sight. But not all stories end with escape. You find yourself in York, watching as a crowd gathers outside the city gates. A priest has been caught. His name is Edmund Campion, a brilliant scholar turned missionary. He returned to England to minister in secret, knowing the risk. He even carried a manifesto Campion's brag which made his intentions noble, but impossible to ignore. Now he's in chains. Campion's trial is pure theatre. He's paraded before jeering crowds, accused of conspiracy, tortured in the Tower. When he's finally executed, the crowd falls silent, not out of fear, but something deeper, doubt. Did he really deserve to die? Or was he simply a man caught between faith and monarchy? Historians still argue whether Campion was ever truly plotting rebellion or whether Walsingham exaggerated the threat to justify England's internal purge. Some say Campion's death was the beginning of martyrdom. Others call it necessary, cleansing. Either way, it works. For now, Walsingham's tactics grow darker. Agents begin posing as Catholic sympathizers, even priests. They gain trust, then betray. One writes a fake letter begging for spiritual aid, complete with smudged tears, only to trap an entire network of believers. You feel it in your chests, the way paranoia spreads like a cold draft in an old hall. Neighbors whisper about one another. Noble families with Catholic ties start changing chapel decor, adding Protestant prayer books to stay safe. One baron famously burns his father's Catholic library and commissions a painting of Elizabeth the next day. It's not just the powerful who suffer. You sneak into a tavern one night and overhear two mothers whispering. One hasn't baptized her baby yet, afraid the priest might be a spy. The other admits she hasn't spoken Latin aloud in 3 years. You can lose your tongue for it, she mutters. You believe her. Meanwhile, Walsingham watches from his web. He doesn't hate Catholics, not exactly. He once said, "I seek to punish treason, not opinion." But in his mind, every unchecked papist is a crack in England's walls. And cracks let in the cold. And then, just when it seems the panic is ebbing, another jolt. News comes from abroad. In Reims, English exiles have set up a training college for missionary priests. Their goal, to return home, convert Protestants, and restore England to Rome. The Jesuits, masters of persuasion and secrecy, are leading the effort. Walsingham doesn't panic. He sharpens his blade. New laws are passed. Merely being a Catholic priest in England is now punishable by death. Those who shelter them face execution, and anyone converting from Protestantism, automatic felony. You visit a woman who was caught housing a Jesuit priest. Her name is Anne Bellamy. She believed she was protecting a man of God. Now she's in a dungeon, and pregnant with the priest's child. Turns out the priest was working for Walsingham. Anne will live. The priest will vanish, and Walsingham, he'll mark it down as another successful operation. By now, the entire nation feels like a stage production written by suspicion and lit by torchlight. You can't look at a crucifix without wondering if it's wired. You can't hear a confession without wondering if it's being recorded in ink or in memory. Even Elizabeth is shaken. She's no theologian, but she knows that fear turns subjects into shadows. One night, you overhear her tell her ladies, "We may wear the same face to church, but we pray to different gods at supper." The Queen, ever the actress, must now play both tolerant ruler and iron-fisted enforcer. And behind her, Walsingham orchestrates the tension with surgical precision. But something's shifting. All this surveillance, all this pressure, it's making cracks in the dam. Soon, one of those cracks will explode into a full-blown plot letters. Poison, foreign gold, and a name written at the bottom of too many dangerous documents. Mary, Queen of Scots, but she's not quite ready yet. For now, the land simmers. Smoke from the stake still clings to the morning air, and the sound of whispered prayers echoes behind shuttered windows. And in a hidden chamber somewhere near Oxford, another priest is pulling on his robes. He lights a candle, opens his Latin Bible, and whispers, "We will try again." The door creaks open on an ordinary summer morning, and inside a country manor just outside London, a young man begins to write a letter. He signs it simply, Anthony Babington. You wouldn't look twice at Babington if you passed him in a crowd. Wealthy, yes, and charming enough to make a lady linger, but hardly a master conspirator. Still, this letter will launch the most infamous Catholic plot of Elizabeth's reign. Drag Mary, Queen of Scots, into her final downfall, and burn several men straight into English history. You might want to take a step back. Babington's world is one of coded prayers and desperate loyalties. He's a devout Catholic nobleman caught in a kingdom that's punishing men like him just for believing differently. He idolizes Mary Stuart, captive queen, Catholic martyr, living symbol of hope for England's oppressed, faithful to Babington. And his circle, Mary isn't just a queen. She's the queen, and Elizabeth, a usurper, but Babington isn't alone. He's one of 13 young Catholic men plotting to free Mary from captivity, assassinate Elizabeth, and install Mary on the throne with the help of a Spanish invasion. The Babington Plot, as it'll later be known, starts in nervous whispers but soon escalates into feverish letters. And you, unfortunately, are now in the room. The conspirators write carefully, never naming Elizabeth, using metaphors like the Great Lady or the usurping dragon. Babington even draws coded illustrations into his letters. A rose, a dagger, a phoenix rising from ashes. It would all be poetic if it weren't so, ... treasonous, ... to communicate with Mary. They use couriers and complex cipher systems. But here's the problem. The entire thing is already compromised. You see, Walsingham knows. He's known for weeks. In fact, he planned for this. Remember Thomas Phillips, the codebreaker? He's been intercepting, copying, and when necessary forging letters, the dead drops Babington's using, set up by Walsingham's agents, the courier he trusts, an English double agent named Gilbert Gifford, working both sides like a man balancing on a razor dot. It's a masterstroke of espionage. Walsingham lets the plot grow, careful not to shut it down too soon. Why? Because it's not enough to know. Babington wants to kill the Queen. Walsingham needs proof that Mary wants it too. You follow the chain. A letter is passed in a beer barrel with a false bottom. Inside, Mary responds, carefully, diplomatically. But then, Walsingham adds something. Forged postscript. Let the gentleman proceed. The matter is of great consequence and must be carefully handled. That line changes everything. Historians still argue whether Mary ever actually approved of the assassination, or whether Philippe's forgery sealed her fate. Some scholars swear the line is genuine. Others call it the most dangerous lie in Tudor history. But in Walsingham's game, perception is power, and perception is about to get a lot more fatal. One by one, Babington's fellow plotters are arrested. They try to scatter, to burn letters, to bite down on poison capsules, but the net is too tight. Some beg for mercy, some cling to their faith, a few even pretend not to know who Mary is. It doesn't work. You're there the day they're taken to execute in public, theatrical, unforgettable. Babington walks with dignity, but his final words are choked. His body is mutilated in the old tradition reserved for traitors, hanged, drawn, and quiety. The first few are so brutal that Elizabeth, who usually distances herself from such things, orders the remaining executions carried out with a bit more mercy. Just a hanging. No disembowelment today. How thoughtful you return to the Tower of London, where Mary, Queen of Scots, is still held. She's older now, tireder, but she still holds herself like royalty. When she's told about the arrests, she doesn't scream, doesn't faint. She simply asks, "Do they have my letters?" The guard says nothing. Her fate is sealed. Elizabeth hesitates desperately. She doesn't want to execute a fellow queen, especially one with royal blood and Catholic sympathizers in every court of Europe. To kill Mary is to make her a martyr, but to let her live, well, she almost didn't survive the last attempt. One sleepless night, Elizabeth paces the length of her private chamber, fingers clenched around a letter from Walsingham. The danger is real, it reads. Mercy is admirable, but finality is safer. The Queen stares at the flame of the candle, then at the window. Somewhere out there, people already consider her a murderer. Will one more body make a difference? She finally signs the warrant, but she also tries to undo it. Sends a messenger galloping after the council. "Wait," she cries. "Don't act until I say so again." Too late. Mary is executed on February 8th, 1587. You stand in the freezing hall at Fotheringay Castle as she walks to the scaffold in crimson, the colour of Catholic martyrdom. Her final words are a prayer. Her executioner misses the first blow. Her lips keep moving even after the second. The third finishes it. Her little dog, hidden in the folds of her dress, runs howling from beneath her skirts. No one forgets that sound. You ride back to London with a lump in your throat and ink on your gloves. The Queen's grief is genuine. So is her fury. She lashes out at her ministers, blames them all. But deep down, she knows this was always going to happen. Walsingham doesn't gloat. He simply adds another page to his ledger and returns to work, because the enemies aren't gone, not even close, and now they're angrier than ever. The cell door groans open, and candlelight spills over a woman writing steadily at a small wooden desk. Her hand doesn't tremble, not even now. Mary, Queen of Scots' widow, prisoner, claimant to the English throne, has always understood the power of a letter. Her enemies will say she wrote her way to execution. Her supporters will say she was tricked into it. Both might be right, but tonight you're closer than anyone else. You watch her dip the quill, straighten the parchment, and write in code her final gambit, or perhaps her fatal mistake. Mary has been a queen since she was 6 days old. She was raised in France, married to a king, adored by Catholics as beautiful, tragic, and divinely chosen. When her husband died, she returned to Scotland and quickly became embroiled in scandal, another marriage, a rebellion, an explosive accusation that she helped murder her second husband, exiled and dethroned. She fled to England seeking protection from her cousin, Elizabeth. What she found instead was a gilded cage. Under house arrest for 19 years, Mary became a queen of paper and ink. Her letters travelled through secret channels, trusted servants, embroidered sleeves, even baked goods, and behind each one, a network of conspirators, both real and imagined. You visit her at Chartley Hall, where she's watched more closely than ever. The household is full of informants. Even the laundress reports to Walsingham. But Mary is careful. She knows she's being watched. And still she keeps writing. Historians still argue whether she truly believed her communications were safe, or if desperation made her reckless. Some think she never wanted Elizabeth dead. Others believe she prayed for it. She's lonely, sick, denied visitors. Her only companion is her faith and her hope that someone, somewhere, will act in her name. Then comes Gilbert Gifford. You remember him, the double agent working for Walsingham. Mary sees him as a godsend. He offers her a new method of communication, letters hidden in beer barrels, delivered to her steward. She believes they're secure. They are not. Every one of them is intercepted, copied, and deciphered by Thomas Phillips before reaching Mary's intended recipient. And now, here she is, writing her fateful reply to Anthony Babington. You peer over her shoulder. She never writes assassinate. Her tone is carefully couched, but she does mention that any attempt to free her would require 6 noble gentlemen to remove the obstacle. She doesn't say Elizabeth's name, but you don't have to be Walsingham to know who she means. Phillips reads the letter that night and sighs. We have her. Still, he's not done. Remember the postscript, the one encouraging Babington to proceed. Phillips adds it himself. When Mary receives Babington's earlier letter, she tucks it into a prayer book and smiles. They are ready. She says aloud, when her own reply leaves the house in a barrel. She says a mass. Neither she nor Babington knows it's already too late. Soon after, soldiers arrive. They ransack her room, seize her letters, her ciphers, even her embroidery. She protests, cries foul. A queen has privileges, she insists. But in Elizabeth's England, being royal isn't immunity, it's threat. Her trial takes place in October 1586. You're seated at the back, listening as a panel of English nobles, none of them her peers, none of them impartial reads, allowed her coded correspondence. Mary doesn't deny her faith or her politics, but she insists she never consented to murder. I am the rightful Queen of England, she says, and have done nothing dishonourable. Her argument is elegant, her tone regal, but the room is stone. The trial, like everything else, has been designed to close the door on her. Outside the hall, the people are divided. Some see Mary as a foreign threat, a Catholic pawn. Others, especially in the North Sea, her as the answer to Elizabeth's sterile rule. And Mary, she already senses what's coming. You return to her quarters the night before the verdict is delivered. She's praying, writing again. This time, it's not to Babington. It's to her cousin, Elizabeth. The letter is heartbreaking, pleading for mercy, for honesty between queens. She offers forgiveness. She asks to die with dignity. Elizabeth never answers. When Mary is finally informed of her execution date, she bows her head. Then she rises and strangely smiles. She spends the night preparing her gown, writing her will, giving final instructions. She wants to die as a martyr should, composed, dressed in crimson, with prayer on her lips. You watch her ascend the scaffold, flanked by Protestant ministers who try unsuccessfully to convert her one last time. She kneels, prays aloud in Latin, and forgives her executioner. Her final words, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." The axe falls. The crowd is still, not triumphant, not joyful, just ... silent. One peculiar detail. After the executioner lifts her head and cries out, "God save the Queen," her red wig slips from his hand. Her real hair, thin and grey, tumbles loose. A final, strange indignity. Later, her small dog, soaked in her blood, is found curled beneath her skirts. It refuses to leave the body. You return to London as news spreads. Foreign embassies are in uproar. Rome calls it murder. France calls it provocation. Even Protestant Germany is uneasy. Elizabeth, she retreats into grief for guilt. She blames her counsellors, especially Walsingham. "You knew I would hesitate," she says. "You knew I would suffer." Walsingham does not reply. His goal was never revenge, it was security. And now, at last, the greatest threat to the Protestant throne is gone. But the cost? Mary is dead, and her memory becomes something far more dangerous, a symbol. The parchment is brittle, the ink brown with age, and the handwriting meticulous but deliberately hard to read. You trail the route of these secret letters as if they were clues in a murder mystery. In a way, they are welcome to the paper battlefield, where empires clash without ever drawing a sword. You begin in the cramped, candle-flickering chamber of Thomas Philippe's, Francis Walsingham's master code-breaker. He's gaunt, sharp-eyed, and obsessive. Imagine a man who would forget to eat if it meant breaking a cipher 10 minutes faster. His walls are lined with scripts in Latin, French, Italian, and something that might be complete gibberish. Or, the future of England, Philippe's doesn't just translate, he deciphers. He's the reason you now know exactly what Mary, Queen of Scots, wrote to Anthony Babington. He's the reason those letters are intercepted, copied, and sealed again so perfectly that no one notices they were opened. It's not glamorous. It's ink-stained fingers, paper cuts, wax burns, and eye strain. He complains the lemon juice messages fade too fast and that invisible ink gets ruined by damp weather. You chuckle, but only a little. After all, you aren't the one decoding a plot to assassinate a monarch while your eyesight dies slowly in a candlelit broom closet. Meanwhile, messengers are the blood vessels of the spy network, young men on horseback with trustworthy faces and sweaty palms. You follow one now, galloping across open fields, a satchel under his cloak. It carries not only ink and secrets, but death warrants. And sometimes those satchels carry something deadlier than letters, a ring filled with poison, a vial of inheritance water, a quaint euphemism for liquid death. Historians still argue whether Walsingham's men used poison as a regular tool or merely a last resort. Some claim Elizabeth forbade it. Others suggest her signature was simply never recorded. But not everything needs to be swallowed or stabbed. Forgery, in the right hands, is just as lethal. You step into a workshop where wax seals are carefully molded from real examples. then pressed onto forgeries so perfect they make the originals look fake. Letters are steamed open with such delicacy that even their scent remains undisturbed. Names are added or omitted to completely shift the weight of a conversation. One missing comma can doom a man. The biggest threat in this world isn't violence, it's misinterpretation. Still, not everyone is fooled by ink and wax. You now find yourself in a dimly lit tavern where a man in a black cloak whispers with an innkeeper. They speak in metaphor. The sheep has left the fold doesn't refer to livestock. The wind turns east might mean a betrayal is coming. These coded phrases, passed mouth to mouth, work because they can't be intercepted. But they also rely on trust. And trust, in Elizabeth's England, is scarce. So what happens when trust fails? You move to the edge of town, where a limp figure dangles from a tree. He's a courier who took a bribe. Or maybe he talked too freely. At the tavern, maybe, just maybe he never existed at all, and the body was staged as a warning. Walsingham's agents don't need to kill everyone. They only need people to believe they will. Back in London, you sneak through the cellars of Cecil House. Here, counterfeit currency isn't made to spend, it's made to frame. Plant a fake Spanish coin on the wrong noble, and suddenly he's a traitor with foreign allegiances. The manipulation goes both ways. Elizabeth herself uses letters like bait. When foreign ambassadors write fawning praise, she responds with warm, flirtatious charm, and copies are quickly leaked to enemies who now believe she's secretly aligning with rivals. It's like playing chess, where each piece is a letter, and every move is also a lie. You find one such letter tucked in the folds of a dress. A lady in waiting discovered it just before the laundress picked up the Queen's gowns. Had it made it to the wash-house, it would have crossed into Spain, carried by a servant paid to scrub hems and courier secrets. The court is a hive of paper. Petitions, love notes, intelligence reports, threats disguised as compliments, warnings, wrapped in poetry, and every scrap might be copied before dawn. Even Elizabeth's own handwriting is mimicked, her seal replicated. The Queen's words, her very words, aren't always hers. They might be Walsingham's, or Cecil's, or Philippe's, or some strange mix of all three, and yet the system works. England, somehow, holds, but not without cracks. You overhear a whispered argument between two members of the Queen's Privy Council. One accuses the other of forging a note to implicate a Dutch envoy. The other claims ignorance, but his smirk says otherwise. A week later, that envoy vanishes from court. No farewell, no explanation, just gone. The Queen says nothing, at least. Not aloud. One of the strangest stand-fringe theories among historians is that Elizabeth herself was a suffragist, that she wrote in secret code known only to Walsingham and a few chosen others. Some even believe she composed her own diplomatic letters in cipher, pretending they were from her ministers to distance herself from dangerous suggestions. No proof, of course, but isn't that the point? As you leave the world of ink and deception, you start to see letters differently. They're not just written, they're performed. A letter can be a dagger, a mask, or a lifeline. And the people who write them, they don't always know which one they're sending. You hold one of Mary's intercepted letters now. The paper trembles slightly in your hand, as if it remembers. It's just words. Quill on parchment, but this killed a queen. The boots pinch at your ankles, the wig itches under your bonnet, and the doublet smells like it's been worn by 3 sweaty men before you. Congratulations in disguise. And in Elizabethan England, that means you're either an actor or a spy. Tonight you're both. You slip through the crowded streets of London, dodging carts and puddles, as you trail a man who is not what he seems. He's known in the records only as D. No first name, no last name, just a letter. He's a master of transformation, one of the unsung agents under Walsingham's payroll who can change his accent, posture, and even apparent social rank with frightening ease. Court. He's a wide-eyed provincial poet. In the taverns, he's a foul-mouthed sailor. Among the Jesuit exiles in Paris, he's Brother Sebastian of Valladolid. No one knows his real name. Some believe he never had one. You follow him into a seamstress's shop where the back room hides. Not fabric, but entire wardrobes, clothes tailored to impersonate dockworkers, monks, merchants, and even noblemen. Each outfit comes with a story, a manner of speaking, and forged documents. This isn't fashion. It's espionage theatre. Disguises aren't just for hiding, they're for belonging. Spies don't sneak around in shadows, they walk boldly, in plain sight. Take Gilbert Gifford, for example. You shadow him through the cobbled alleys of London as he switches allegiances like gloves. A Catholic sympathizer, a double agent. Both. Historians still argue whether Gifford was a loyal servant of the crown or a traitor manipulating both sides for personal gain. You watch him deliver letters to Mary, Queen of Scots, while also informing Walsingham of every word she writes. He's one of the key players in the Babington Plot, slipping coded letters in and out of beer barrels, while feigning religious devotion. He plays every role to perfection until he disappears, vanished like smoke, perhaps to a monastery, perhaps to a grave. Others are more obvious, like Anthony Munday, who works as a spy in Italy under the cover of being a playwright. You snort. Only in Elizabethan England would drama be a believable profession and a government cover. You find yourself backstage at a ramshackle London theatre, where young actors rehearse sword fights and noblemen watch with concealed intent. Walsingham, ever pragmatic, employs actors as spies. Why? Because they already lie for a living. They're trained to change faces, voices, loyalties, all within the same scene. And they're already used to eavesdropping, memorizing lines, and pretending to be someone they're not. Perfect, one of the fringe theories still, hotly debated by scholars, is that William Shakespeare himself was a minor intelligence agent, a man with access to court secrets, foreign affairs, and dangerous political ideas, who disguised them in iambic pentameter and court jesters. You roll your eyes. Maybe, maybe not. But then again, why do so many of his plays revolve around disguise, betrayal, assassination, and kings in crisis? Coincidence or confession? You move now through a stately manor in the countryside, where the local lord is throwing a feast. Beneath, the cheerful clinking of goblets and the squealing of pigs on the spit, there are spies tucked into every corner. The kitchen boy is paid to report conversations he overhears. The stable hand is actually a trained horse thief planted to follow any noble who leaves the party unexpectedly. The minstrel, he's been to Spain twice and doesn't just sing. You begin to feel paranoid, and that's exactly the point. Disguise isn't just physical, it's psychological. Walsingham's men know that fear is the best costume of all. If people think they're being watched, they'll change their behavior. If they suspect their barber might be a spy, they'll shave themselves and think twice before muttering about the Queen. It's mental warfare with lace trim and rosemary, perfume, Some disguises get too deep. You meet one of Walsingham's lost agents in a tavern near Calais. He speaks only French now, refuses to answer to his English name, and seems genuinely convinced he's someone else entirely. They say he started the job pretending to be a Catholic priest. Now he swears he actually is one. The mask becomes the man. Not all disguises are about sneaking into enemy territory. Sometimes they're for fooling people at home. Elizabeth herself wears one of the grandest. Think about it. She calls herself the Virgin Queen. Untouchable, married to England. She wears heavy white makeup, a towering red wig, and 1,000 pearls stitched into her gowns. Each a symbol, each an illusion. No one sees her without her face on. And yet she sees everyone. She's not just a monarch, she's a living myth. A carefully constructed costume of divinity, elegance, and cunning. In a court full of spies, her disguise is the only one that truly matters. It's not to hide her identity, it's to control it. You step into her chambers briefly. Just a breath of time and catch her without the full regalia. Her eyes are sharp, her hair thinner than rumors suggest. She looks tired, but still calculating. The mask might be off, but the spy remains. Because in the world of Elizabethan espionage, disguise isn't about lying, it's about survival, and whether you're a coded letter, a tavern bard, or the Queen herself, your greatest weapon is who people think you are. The tower looms ahead like a stone-toothed beast, silent now, but only for a moment. You tread across its cold courtyard, feeling the chill of countless ghosts at your back. Every cobblestone whispers, every iron hinge groans. You've heard the legends, but tonight you're not here for Anne Boleyn's ghost or some cursed royal sapphire. No, you're here for the noise that history often tries to muffle. The sound of England's intelligence machine tightening its grip. You're here for the screams. Down, you go spiraling stone steps, slick with damp and timming to the lower chambers. The ones not on the public tour. The ones with names etched into the walls by trembling fingers. Prisoners, traitors, spies. Some were guilty, some just unlucky. All of them were caught in the web of a network that promised loyalty but thrived on betrayal. Your feet stop before a heavy door reinforced with bands of iron. Behind it is the interrogation room. You don't want to go in, but you do. Inside, candlelight flickers off, hooks and racks and buckets whose purpose you'd rather not imagine. The scent is sharp sweat, leather, blood, old smoke. In the center sits a chair. Not ornate, not comfortable, just solid, with leather straps at wrists and ankles. This is the final stop for many of the Queen's enemies or people who simply knew too much. Tonight, the unfortunate guest is a messenger caught on the road to Dover, carrying letters in a hollowed-out boot heel. Harmless enough, he claimed. A cobbler's apprentice, he said. But he broke after 2 days, revealing 3 names and a safe house near Oxford. Torture in Elizabethan England wasn't standard practice. Parliament had to approve it for each case, and technically it was still illegal. But Francis Walsingham, he was the master of bending legality into justification, especially when Her Majesty's safety was at stake. Historians still argue whether Walsingham's use of torture was systematic or selective, but one thing's clear: it was effective. Pain made people talk, and silence could cost a kingdom. Your guide tonight is Richard Topcliffe, Elizabeth's personal interrogator. He's not a monster, at least not in his own eyes. He sees himself as a guardian, a patriot, but to others he's a sadist with legal permission. You watch him work, not just with tools, but with words. He whispers, flatters, threatens. He knows when to let the silence stretch, when to tighten the strap an extra notch. He tells one prisoner, "The Queen will forgive, if only you speak." And then he leans close and adds, "And if you don't, well, you won't need forgiveness." The Tower becomes a theatre of controlled fear, and it's not just for the sake of breaking enemies. It's for building stories, confessions too. Be printed, testimonies to be weaponized. What a man says under duress might be published across London by week's end, his pain transformed into state propaganda. You pass a chamber where a pressman prepares a pamphlet, a warning against Jesuit treachery. The evidence comes straight from the Tower, filtered, shaped, ready to terrify England's Protestants. One man's agony becomes another man's bedtime story. But not everyone breaks. You lean over the stone railing to peer into a pit where one prisoner sits cross-legged, refusing to speak. His name is Edmund Campion, a Jesuit priest caught smuggling letters and hopes across England. He's already been stretched on the rack, already had his fingernails peeled. He still smiles, they say. Campion wrote his final defense with trembling hands and bound wrists, calling the Queen a noble lady, even as he was condemned to die. His trial was a spectacle, his death a statement, hung, drawn and quartered at Tyburn. The crowd cheered. The body was buried in secret. There's a strange, quiet fear that settles over you now. Not of being tortured, but of being misunderstood, of being mistaken for the wrong person, of someone finding a letter you didn't write and deciding your fate with it in the Tower. Truth isn't a shield, it's whatever the Crown says it is. You climb upward again, passing cells carved into the stone. One is filled with straw and chains, another with books, a writing desk, and a chamber pot. Not all prisoners are equal. Some spies are treated like rats, others like scholars depending on their usefulness. A surprising name echoes through the hallway: John Gerard. Another Jesuit, yes, but also one of the few to escape the Tower. You grin as you imagine it. He tied rope from a smuggled orange crate, climbed down the wall with raw fingers, and disappeared into the fog of London. A miracle or excellent planning, and let's not forget the women. You're escorted past a chamber where a noble woman named Anne Vaux once waited. She wasn't tortured. She was watched closely, because information can be a weapon no matter who wields it. And sometimes the Queen's enemies came dressed in silk with excellent penmanship. Spying wasn't just a man's game. After all, some historians still argue how much Elizabeth herself knew about the Tower's methods. Did she approve the torture warrants eagerly or sign them with a shudder and a prayer? She presented herself as merciful, almost motherly, but she rarely interfered when Walsingham pushed for more decisive measures. You step outside at last, the night wind hitting your face like a gulp of clean water. You didn't scream, you didn't confess, but you didn't do anything heroic either. That's how the Tower works. It doesn't make saints or villains, just survivors and ghosts, and as you walk away, you can still hear them. You duck into the corner of a smoky tavern, the kind where the floor never seems quite dry, and every glance lasts just a second too long. It smells like roasted onions, wet wool, and secrets. Here, in the clamour of clinking tankards and muttered gossip, the next layer of Elizabeth's spy network hums quietly under your feet. Because not all intelligence comes from encrypted letters or noble traitors. Sometimes it starts with a barmaid wiping a mug too slowly, a stable boy who asks the wrong question, or a midwife with surprisingly detailed knowledge of local politics. Tonight, you're meeting one of Walsingham's most valuable assets, and she looks exactly like someone you'd ignore. Her name's Marjorie. Just Marjorie. She refills your drink with a grin that doesn't reach her eyes and drops her voice to a whisper. You know, the vicar's nephew's been up to something strange, riding out at night with no lantern, and always looking over his shoulder like a fox near the henhouse. You glance around. No one's watching, but Marjorie keeps talking like she's just making conversation about the weather. Welcome to the invisible army. While nobles plotted and couriers ran letters through France, the real pulse of England the villages, inns, and market stalls beat, to the rhythm of common folk who were anything but. Walsingham's network extended beyond the court and the continent. It reached into the very bones of the nation. His genius wasn't just in decoding. Threats it was in listening before anyone even knew there was something to decode. Historians still argue how formalized this domestic spying really was. Some say Walsingham orchestrated it like a symphony. Others argue it was more like jazzy improvised, opportunistic, held together by coin, loyalty, and a lot of fear. You slip out of the tavern with a breadcrumb of information, a name, a direction, a hunch. That's how most tips started. And when you stack enough of them, the puzzle begins to take shape. Your next stop is a barber shop. Not because you need a shave, but because barbers hear everything. Think about it. People sit vulnerable, unarmed, and chatty with sharp steel at their necks. You sit, the blade cool on your skin, and the barber leans in. Strange, isn't it? He murmurs, how many foreign accents we've had lately. Lot of Spaniards, lot of quiet ones, passing through like ghosts. He's not guessing, he's reporting. Walsingham, paid for such tidbits in coin or favors. He also threatened, when needed. If you had debt, a secret, or a son of age to be drafted, might be enough to convince you to keep your ears open. But some, like the barber or Marjorie, did it for something else entirely. The idea of England itself, or the fear of what would happen if England fell. One of the oddest examples of domestic surveillance comes from the world of midwives. You shuffle into a cramped cottage, herbs drying from the rafters, a wooden cradle creaking nearby. The woman, inside grey-haired, hawk-eyed, greets you like an old friend. And she talks. Oh, she talks. The midwife has attended the births of noble bastards and servant girls alike. She knows which men sneak in after dark and which women clutch letters beneath their pillows. And sometimes, if a newborn looks suspiciously too well fed, or if a birth is hushed up entirely, she reports it. In one case, a midwife's idle remark about a noblewoman's Spanish lover led to an investigation. Then an arrest, then the unraveling of an entire smuggling ring. All because a woman noticed something odd about a baby's timing. You begin to realize this isn't a network built only on loyalty or logic. It's built on observation, noticing what no one else thinks is worth mentioning. The meat seller whose cart always rattles louder going home. The washerwoman who spends too long scrubbing one shirt every Tuesday. The child who sings a French lullaby she shouldn't know. Of course, not all tips pan out. Sometimes paranoia ran wild. A tailor in York once accused his neighbour of being a papist spy because the man wore red stockings too often. Another woman reported a goose seller for smelling foreign. Walsingham's agents investigated both. One was harmless. The other, it turns out, had a cousin smuggling letters into Ireland. Coincidence? Maybe. But in this climate, there were No coincidence as one fringe story that's still debated. A baker's apprentice who supposedly baked ciphered messages into crust solo loaves for courier pigeons. Some historians call it nonsense. Others point to scraps of half-burned parchment found in a chimney outside Norwich. And speaking of pigeons' ears, there were messenger birds, but they were notoriously unreliable, sometimes intercepted, sometimes eaten. One famously failed to deliver a message because it landed on a church roof and refused to move for 3 days. So much for urgency. You're invited to one last stop. Tonight, a travelling theatre troupe. They're performing a bawdy comedy in the village square, but 2 of them aren't actors. They're watchers. Embedded among the crowd, they're trained to spot strange faces, coded gestures, or unusual behaviour. Walsingham used entertainers more than once. Jugglers, puppeteers, even fortune-tellers. Who better to blend in? Who better to wander freely? From town to town, asking questions under the guise of performance. As the play ends and the applause fades, you catch a glimpse of one of them slipping away, no smile, no bows. He's off to send a report via an Osler boy who'll drop the note behind a church bench before dawn. There's no grand headquarters, no official badge, just whispered instructions, burned notes, and a growing sense that anyone could be watching. You lean back, breath misting in the night air. The candle in your room flickers. You're no noble, no courtier, just a face in the crowd. But here, in Elizabethan England, that's exactly who the spies are counting on. You stroll into the glittering court once more. This time, all eyes are on Elizabeth. Not because she's delivering one of her razor-sharp speeches or staring down the Spanish ambassador, but because she's smiling, which, in Elizabeth's court, is as dangerous as a knife. She's dancing, slowly, measured steps, with a foreign envoy from France. His beard is sharp, his smile sharper, and you can already see 5 men watching from the shadows, 3 of whom you know work for Walsingham. The other 2, probably watching for France. Courtship in this place is never just about romance. It's a chessboard. And Elizabeth is the queen who never sacrifices her king because she never married one. You're witnessing the pageantry of the Virgin Queen, a role as much constructed as it is real. And that title, it wasn't just personal branding, it was political strategy. It kept powerful men guessing, kept foreign kings hoping, and kept England's enemies wondering who would succeed her if she died childless. Because uncertainty in politics is powered. So, while poets fond and painters immortalized her in pearls and pageant armor, her council tracked every rose she accepted, every late-night walk, every long look across a banquet table, and you're suddenly aware that in this game, flirtation is surveillance. Take Robert Dudley, the dashing favourite since Elizabeth's youth. You hear whispers that she once nearly married him until his wife died under suspicious circumstances, or, rather, fell down the stairs. No one quite knows. Historians still argue whether it was murder, accident, or a cruel twist of fate that kept him from the throne. But from that moment, Elizabeth pulled back. Not from Dudley, he remained close, but from the idea of marriage itself. You spot Dudley across the hall now, standing a little too close, a little too familiar, his every word weighed, not just by Elizabeth, but by the circle around her ladies-in-waiting, her guards, because if he had influence, then so did anyone he talked to, and the gossip would move faster than the plague. Courtships weren't just about feelings, they were about alliances. When Elizabeth entertained the idea of marrying the Duke of Anjou, brother to the French king, it wasn't just idle fancy, it was a maneuver. France could be ally or enemy, and dangling her hand in marriage bought time. It made Spain nervous. It made Rome furious. It made Protestant nobles sweat. But here's the wild part: Elizabeth may have never intended to marry him. Just the act of pretending was enough to shake Europe like a chessboard flipped mid-game. Walsingham hated the Anjou proposal. He didn't trust Catholics, didn't trust the French, and didn't trust the boy duke's penchant for flouncing into court in silks and perfume. The man wore heels, actual jeweled heels. In Walsingham's world, that was probably a federal offense. He had spies watching the Anjou entourage before their ships even docked, and still, Elizabeth kept smiling, not because she wanted a husband, but because she wanted a reaction. The art of deception ran deep in her blood. As you wander past the royal gallery, you pause at her portraits, those glittering, icon-laden depictions of eternal youth. You realize they are lies, carefully engineered lies, and yet they work. Because if a queen can fool a painter, she can fool a prince. There's a lesser-known figure you meet next Christopher Hatton, a courtier, a favorite, a man who could dance like a dream and read Latin by candlelight. Elizabeth adored him, but so did Spain and France, and the Pope probably had a file on him. Everyone wanted to know, was he just another pretty face, or was he whispering policy between dances? Walsingham, ever cautious, had Hatton watched too. Even the favourites weren't exempt, especially the favourites, because they were the most dangerous. The ones with access, the ones with pillow talk. Rumour had it that Elizabeth never let any man into her bedroom alone, that even her closest companions never saw her fully undressed, that no one, not a single soul, could say for sure what the Queen was doing when the candles were low. And while some write that off as prudery or paranoia, others suggest it was brilliance, because if no one could ever prove she was compromised, then she never was. It's one of the oldest tricks in spycraft, ambiguity. If people are unsure, they hesitate. If they hesitate, you win. One fringe tidbit that pops up in old letters. A foreign ambassador once claimed Elizabeth kept a mirror with a hidden door behind her dressing table, where she would eavesdrop on conversations in the next room. Most scholars dismiss it as gossip. But then again, this is the same court where a woman once hid a message in her corset boning, so who knows? You catch sight of another woman, Nalbess Throckmorton, one of Elizabeth's closest attendants. Sharp eyes, quicker tongue. She's young, clever, and too close to Sir Walter Raleigh for comfort. That, of course, leads to trouble, but that's another night's story. For now, understand this. In Elizabeth's court, affection was currency. Love was leverage. Every smile was an investment. And every proposal, no matter how fanciful, triggered a report filed in triplicate by Walsingham's scribes. You've probably noticed by now no one here is safe from suspicion. Not the Queen, not her lovers, not even her shadows. Especially, not her shadows. Because in the great game of Elizabethan politics, romance wasn't about love. It was about who else was watching. When the Queen tilted her head and said, "Perhaps," you step from the velvet glow of the English court into the damp chill of an English port, where salt clings to your skin and every shadow smells faintly of tar, sweat, and secrets. The year is 1586. Ships creak in the fog. Letters are burned. And a storm is coming, not just from the sea, but from the black-hearted ambitions of an empire determined to crush Elizabeth's Spain. The name lingers in every whisper, every coded note, every intercepted courier's breath. To Elizabeth's Protestant England, Spain is not just an enemy, it is the enemy, and their king, Philip II. He's not playing chess, he's building a cannon. You board a small English merchant ship under cover of night, ducking beneath barrels of oranges and wool that hide a man curled up with a parchment tucked into his boot. He's no sailor, he's an agent one of Walsingham's, and his destination is Lisbon, where Spain's fleet is growing by the hour. See, by now, England's spy network isn't just domestic. It stretches across the Channel, over the Pyrenees, into Italian cloisters and French salons. If there's a whispered threat to Elizabeth's life, Walsingham wants it heard before it crosses the border. But Spain's spies are just as busy, and far better funded. Philip II runs the world's largest Catholic empire. His gold flows from the Americas. His informants read their Bible with one eye and forge royal seals with the other. He believes Elizabeth is a heretic queen, a bastard, unfit to rule. Her Protestantism is not just politics, it's blasphemy, and he wants her gone. That brings us to a man named Bernardino di Mendoza, Philip's ambassador to England until he got just a little too involved in plots against Elizabeth. You saw his shadow back during the Babington affair. He was one of the strings behind the curtain, tugging on English Catholics and Mary, Queen of Scots. Like so many marionettes, after his expulsion, he continued his work from France, Spanish. Agents crisscrossed Europe, from dusty taverns to candlelit chapels, passing letters encrypted with invisible ink and prayer book codes. These weren't amateurs, they were professionals, trained by Jesuits, funded by kings, protected by fear. Historians still argue whether Spain's network was truly as vast and efficient as English propaganda made it seem, more if Walsingham, ever the chess player, exaggerated the threat to justify his own surveillance state. But either way, something very real was building off the coast of Spain. You feel it before you see it. Wooden hulls, black sails, iron mouths yawning from Spanish galleons, an armada the armadas forming, and every spy in Europe knows it. Back in London, you slip into a smoky tavern near the docks. Men speak in low tones about ships spotted in Cadiz, about holy war, about cleansing the island. Some are drunk, others are not. One of them bearded, hooded, not drinking at Ali's, listening more than talking. You realize his ring bears a cross carved in bone, a Jesuit, or pretending to be one. Walsingham's spies are here too. They blend into the crowd like ash into soot. Their job, report everything. Who says what, who leaves early, who leaves alive. But you don't just stay in the taverns. You go higher. You're in the room when Elizabeth receives news from her informants, abroad-coded letters hidden in barrels of wine, in the bindings of books, sewn into the sleeves of coats, reports of Spanish naval activity, movements of troops, secret meetings with the Pope. One particularly juicy fringe report claims Philip II consulted an astrologer who told him the heretic queen will die by water. Whether it's true or not, you can practically hear Walsingham muttering in Latin under his breath. In response, England's defences go into overdrive. Letters fly from court to coast, beacons are tested, ships are outfitted, and Walsingham doesn't just want soldiers, he wants moles. English agents slip into Spanish ports, disguised as traders and friars. One pretends to be a deserter, another pretends to be drunk. Most just pretend to be invisible. One curious fringe tidbit. There's a tale of an Englishwoman who worked as a laundress in Lisbon, gathering gossip from soldiers under clothes and sneaking notes inside soap cakes. Her name is lost to history, but the messages made it back. Then there's Anthony Standen, codename the Venetian, a Catholic nobleman deeply embedded in European high society, but secretly feeding England every morsel he could digest. He played both sides, dined with cardinals, toasted with spies, and carefully, very carefully, tilted the game board toward Elizabeth and you. You start to see just how many of these players have blood on their hands. Not from war, from information still. The tide rises. By 1587, Spain is nearly ready. And then one of the boldest preemptive moves in spy history, Sir Francis Drake's raid on Cadiz. They call it singeing the King of Spain's beard, because Drake, with Elizabeth's blessing and Walsingham's silent nod, sails straight into Spain's harbour and burns their ships. Not all of them, but enough to delay the Armada a year. Enough to send a message: we see you. You're there, in spirit at least. As Drake dances along the Spanish coast, stealing charts and gossip, leaving fire behind him. Back in England, Walsingham watches reports pour in with something dangerously close to a smirk. But even he knows the game is far from over, because Philip is furious. And now, it's not just a plot, it's a war, which means Walsingham's spies. They're no longer just gatherers of whispers. They're the first line of defense in the greatest threat Elizabeth will ever face. You stand beneath a grey English sky, chilled by more than the sea breeze. It's August 1588, and the Spanish Armada is here, sort of. What you see are bonfires flickering across distant hilltops, beacons lit in frantic sequence from Cornwall to London, each flame a pulse in the country's nervous system. And right now, that system is panicking. But here's the thing they don't teach you in school. The war you're imagining with cannonballs flying, sailors shouting, ships locked in mortal combat. That's the noisy part, the visible part, the part that looks good in paintings. The real war, the one that actually decided England's fate. It was fought months ago, quietly in letters, in whispered warnings, in Walsingham's secret chambers and candlelit debriefings. This is the final act. Yes, but the battle itself was nearly won before the sails even darkened the horizon. Still, you want drama, and oh, you get it. The Spanish Armada, 130 ships, strong, has arrived in the English Channel, intending to sweep north, rendezvous with Spanish troops in the Low Countries, and crush Protestant England under holy boots. The Pope has blessed it. Philip has financed it. Catholic Europe has held its breath. And Elizabeth has spies. You follow her to Tilbury, where she dons armour and gives her anathema speech before her assembled troops. I know I have the body of a weak, feeble woman, she says, but I have the heart and stomach of a king. Goosebumps, tears. She's not just queen, she's war. But even now, she knows something you don't. The Armada has problems, thanks to Walsingham's network. England already knew Spain's general plan. They'd intercepted letters, stolen charts, bribed commanders. One English double agent, posing as a Catholic exile, had actually attended Spanish planning meetings. He didn't just listen, he talked. And what he said, loudly, confidently, persuasively helped nudge Spain toward a deeply flawed strategy: hug the French coast, then try to link up with land troops who weren't quite ready. Oops, historians still argue whether what spies deliberately manipulated Spain into this clumsy plan, or merely observed its unraveling in real time. But no one denies it. England had advance notice, and that turned what could have been annihilation into a very dramatic inconvenience. From the cliffs, you watch English ships smaller, faster, hungrier, harass the bulky Spanish galleons. The English don't fight fair. They don't form neat battle lines. They dart, hit, vanish, then strike again, like wasps stinging a blind bear. And then comes the fire. English captains, including that dashing pirate Sir Francis Drake, send fire. Ships' empty vessels set ablaze, sailing straight into the anchored Spanish fleet. It's chaos. The Spanish scatter, snap anchors, drift into disarray. And suddenly, their tight defensive crescent is a messy, flammable mess. You smell tar. You hear the pop of pitch-catching flame, and as the Armada flees north, skirting Scotland's angry coasts, nature loyal, only to know one does what war cannot. Storms shred the remnants of Spain's pride. Ships sink. Sailors drown. Some stagger ashore in Ireland, only to be executed by local English forces. Spain is broken, but don't pop the mead yet, because this wasn't just a battle won by ships or storms. It was won by preparation, by months of quiet maneuvering, of coded messages, of whispers in taverns and spies in the pews. You return to London. The bells ring, people cheer. Poets write sonnets about England's deliverance, but Walsingham doesn't celebrate. Not really, he knows. You never kill a hydra by chopping off one head. Spain will regroup. Catholic plots will continue. The whispers will never truly stop. Still, there's satisfaction, because the spy network, his network worked. It anticipated, it misdirected, it informed, and it held. You wander into a celebration near the Thames. There's dancing, food, poorly tuned lutes. Someone's fashioned a bonfire out of old Spanish flags. A boy sells Armado-shaped pastries that taste like burnt bread. A woman in a too-big helmet recites Elizabeth's speech with flair, elbowing her way into admiration. And you smile. Because beneath this joyful clamor lies something darker, more potent. A state that now believes in espionage, that has tasted the power of secrets, and wants more. This victory isn't just military, it's psychological. The Queen now trusts her invisible army, even Parliament, often skeptical of Walsingham's budget requests, starts nodding along. The spy network gets funding, structure, even a degree of unofficial legality. Walsingham isn't just the Queen's spymaster now. He's the architect of a new kind of warfare. And England is no longer merely a small island fending off giants. It's something else. It's a player, a country that understands you don't need the biggest army, just the best information. One fringe tale begins to circulate after the Armadas. Defeat a rumor that Walsingham himself orchestrated a fake prophecy delivered to Philip II, convincing him the stars favored a summer invasion. There's no proof, of course, but the idea that even the heavens were hacked by Elizabeth's men. Delicious. You slip out of the crowd as the fireworks crackle above. Somewhere, Walsingham sits by a window, his face expressionless. He's not drinking. He's already planning for the next plot, the next cipher, the next whisper in the dark. And you realize the Armada was never the end. It was just proof that the real Game of Thrones would be played in silence. You find yourself ducking through the bustling crowds along the south bank of the Thames, passing fishmongers, gamblers, pickpockets, and then the thatched roof of a round wooden structure, rising like a crown above the noise, the Globe Theatre. But don't get too comfortable. This isn't just a place for entertainment. Tonight, it's also crawling with spies. You ease into the shadows near the entrance. Actors are rehearsing, sword fights clashing on stage while the groundlings roar. It smells like sawdust, sweat, and ale-soaked excitement. And somewhere in this cheering crowd, Elizabeth's agents listen just as carefully as they watch, because the theatre, it's not an escape from politics. It is politics layered, costumed, cloaked in metaphor and satire. Take a seat, but not too close to the stage. That's where the noblemen sit, where courtiers sneak glances at rivals, and secret alliances simmer behind polite applause. You want to stay behind the pillars, where whispers go unnoticed. One of those whisperers is a playwright, William Shakespeare, of course. But here's where it gets curious. No one's entirely sure where he got his intelligence. His plays show an uncanny awareness of foreign courts, dynastic histories, even obscure military strategies. Historians still argue whether he had contact with court informants or was himself a kind of unofficial propagandist. And then there's Christopher Marlowe. You know, the other Elizabethan genius, the one who was stabbed through the eye in a tavern brawl. Officially, it was a drunken dispute. Over the bill, unofficially, Marlowe was absolutely a spy. Walsingham had recruited him out of Cambridge. Marlowe travelled to Catholic strongholds under the guise of academic scholarship, returning with letters, names, confessions. He played at being a poet, but he also played at being dead. Some still believe he faked that fatal stabbing and lived abroad under a different name. Paranoia makes for great fiction, after all. Tonight's performance is Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Roman tragedy full of betrayal, manipulation, and coded warnings about power. The audience sees daggers and togas. The spies see something else, a subtle critique of tyranny, a warning, or maybe a test, and they aren't just watching the play, they're watching the reaction. Who winces at certain lines? Who claps too long when Brutus defends rebellion? Who leans forward when Caesar talks of distrust? These moments aren't lost, they're logged. You slip around the back of the theatre, where actors remove their wigs and noblemen swap back into their street clothes. A man in a long cloak hands a coin to a young boy who just delivered a message wrapped in stage directions. Was it a love note, or a coded list of suspected Catholic sympathizers? Hard to say, but the boy walks away whistling Greensleeves. Known signal, even in the wings, the game is on. Across town, other performance spaces are no different. Masks at court, street puppet shows, travelling actors who double as informants. In Elizabeth's England theatre is espionage, and sometimes the performances are real life. You hear of a nobleman staging a fake wedding to draw out a suspected traitor, or a foreign ambassador who funds a new play then uses the production meetings to gather intelligence from disgruntled Englishmen. You even hear rumours of actors being sent abroad with touring companies, putting on shows for European courts, while casually scanning the room for military maps and nervous whispers. And it works, because artists are invisible. Who suspects the jester of being dangerous? Who suspects the playwright of carrying poison? You pause to admire the painted scenery backstage, wooden trees, rolling waves, an enormous painted castle on muslin. It's flimsy, but that's the point. Illusion is everything. And in the spy world, illusion kills. You hear a tale half true, half legend of an actor who gave a performance so convincing it sparked a real riot. He was promptly recruited by Walsingham. From then on, he staged panic. On command, appearing in taverns to deliver prescripted lines that incited specific groups into action or chaos. Now, here's your fringe fact for the night. Some believe Shakespeare's Hamlet was secretly commissioned as a coded allegory for Elizabeth's inner circle Hamlet's distrustful court, spying servants, and poisonous plots reflecting the Queen's own poisoned court. Others say that's nonsense. Historians still argue whether Shakespeare's plays were propaganda, warnings, or just really good drama. Still, as you slip through the crowd and hear Hamlet's "to be or not to be" echo through the rafters, you realize this isn't just about art. It's about control, about testing loyalty, about shaping public perception one rhyming couplet at a time. Elizabeth herself understood this. She often attended plays incognito, her face hidden behind veils, her presence unannounced. She didn't just want entertainment. She wanted to observe, to see what her people believed, feared, cheered. The theatre gave her a window into England's emotional temperature, and just maybe, a list of names as you leave the theatre district. The sun begins to set. The performers bow. The crowd disperses. But for the spies hidden among them, the performance continues. You catch sight of a man who laughed too loudly at the wrong moment. He's now being followed by a woman holding a basket of apples, except the apples don't jiggle when she walks. Because there are no apples, only hollowed-out wooden spheres stuffed with notes. She disappears into an alley. The man vanishes behind her. This is the real stage, and the play never ends. You step into a narrow London alley where the echo of your own footsteps sounds suspicious. It's damp, bricked tight on both sides, with laundry swinging above like makeshift curtains. This isn't just the city's underbelly, it's nervous system. And tonight, you're watching the messengers of that system make their moves in the dark. A man ahead of you pauses, looks back, then kneels beside a loose cobblestone near a boarded-up alehouse. His hand darts into the gap. He pulls out a folded parchment, small and sealed in wax. A dead drop. Congratulations. You've just witnessed one of the oldest tricks in the spy playbook. Here's how it works. Instead of face-to-face meetings, which are messy and easily surveilled, spies use predetermined hiding spots to pass messages. A church pew with a loose plank, the handle of a broken water pump, even hollow loaves of bread delivered by bakery boys trained to ask no questions and remember no faces. You notice a chalk mark on the alley wall, a small star half smeared by rain. It's a signal. It means the message has been picked up, or that someone is being watched. Codes, signs, and seemingly innocent objects. These are the tools of the Elizabethan underground, and right now, you're stepping directly into that underground. You follow a second figure, this one a woman in a plain grey hood. She strolls past the local butcher's stall, slows down beside a blind beggar playing a flute, and lets her fingers drop a tiny metal cylinder into his tin cup. Not a coin, a hollow tube. Another message, disguised as charity. It's not glamorous. There are no exploding gadgets or slow-motion horse chases. But it's efficient and absolutely terrifying, because a single mistake, dropping the wrong note, arriving too early, getting caught by a servant who wasn't supposed to be home can mean torture. Or worse, take the case of Gilbert Gifford. Remember that charming young seminarian who turned double agent during the Babington Plot? For months, he passed messages between Mary, Queen of Scots, and her supporters all, while secretly feeding the letters to Walsingham. He played both sides so well that some modern historians still argue whether he was in control or just another pawn. Then there was Charles Paget, another nobleman in exile. He acted like an agent of Catholic resistance. But the deeper you dig into his correspondence, the more it looks like he was feeding misinformation back to Elizabeth's court. Or maybe both courts. Historians still haven't sorted out which side he was really on, or if he knew. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some agents used egg whites to write secret messages. The writing would remain invisible until exposed to heat, like from a candle. A good way to keep your secrets hidden, lest your enemies also happen to be using heat to find them. You lean on a cold stone wall outside a scribe's shop, watching two ink-stained boys deliver what appear to be invoices. One of them drops a parchment that looks unimportant and you realize it's written entirely in reverse. Not mirrored, just ... reversed. Another cipher, another code. This world is full of tricks. One agent writes in Latin, but substitutes numbers for every third letter. Another uses popular ballads to conceal clues where the third word of each line, read in order, spells out a meeting place. And in one bizarre case, a servant trained her parrot to squawk phrases that meant something very different to the right ears. What seemed silly today was deadly serious then. And it all depended on loyalty, an increasingly rare commodity. You walk past a boarded tenement where an informant was caught and dragged out by his neighbors. They never found his body. They did find a book hidden under his floorboards, each page containing a pressed flower, code, color, order. Each petal stood for a location, a name, a threat level, a floral ledger of treason. The deeper you go, the more you realize this. Double. Agents are not accidents, they're necessities. Elizabeth's network didn't just tolerate betrayal, it relied on it. But here's the twist. Sometimes the Queen herself used misinformation to flush out double agents. A nobleman, growing close to Spain, is fed a liar-fabricated decree or a faked signature. When he repeats it back to the wrong person, boom, exposed. And if he's lucky, he ends up under house arrest in the countryside. If not, well, you've already seen the tower. In this world, everyone wears a mask, even those closest to the crown. One of Walsingham's own scribes, supposedly loyal for years, was caught ferrying information to France. How? His ink left a specific scent, one that a particularly nosy housekeeper noticed while dusting his desk. No one smelled it again. You pass a laundry line hung with cloaks, socks. An undergarment sound suddenly remembers something odd. Certain taverns posted laundry outside to signal whether it was safe to pass messages. A red sock meant no. A blue sleeve meant yes. A missing undershirt that meant someone had been caught. Don't approach, you chuckle softly. Today, people use emoji. Then, it was laundry. As the moon climbs high over the city, you see the final handoff of the nighter. Young woman kneels beside a memorial in a churchyard, pretending to cry. She hides her face in her hands. A man walks past, dropping a single clove into the grass at her feet. She picks it up when he's gone, a clove. Small, harmless, and also a prearranged signal for he's dead. Move the backup plan into place. You glance behind you. Are you being followed? Probably, because in Elizabeth's England, no one really retires from the spy game. Once you've passed a message, you are the message. Once you've read the wrong letter, you become the risk. That's the most dangerous truth of all. And in this dark, silent world of whispers and drops and coded cloves, the greatest danger isn't being caught, it's being forgotten. You don't even hear him coming. The alley is quiet. Your breath fogs faintly in the air. Then soft steps, too light for boots, echo in rhythm behind you. A chill dances up your spine. You glance over your shoulder, just a little too late. The man isn't tall, not imposing, but the dagger at his belt isn't for decoration. Neither is the rolled parchment he carries, fastened with twine and sealed with a wax stamp that looks royal. This is no ordinary courier. He gives you a look, a flick of the chin. A dart of the eyes and disappears into the back door of a bookbinder's shop. Gone, no words. Because this isn't about conversation. This is a delivery from the very top of Elizabeth's pyramid. You've just glimpsed the nerve center, the Queen's direct hand in espionage, despite all her courtiers and ministers. There are times when Elizabeth herself bypasses them, when information is just too sensitive, when she wants to ensure that no meddling fingers twist the message. In those rare cases, Her Majesty sends her own shadows, and they don't take orders from anyone else. You creep through the winding streets of Whitehall, the palace looming like a beast in the distance. Behind its gilded walls, Elizabeth is poring over letters herself, quill scratching against parchment, eyes scanning ciphers she's learned to read without aid. That's right, she doesn't just receive intelligence. She edits it, rewrites it, occasionally adds theatrical flair for effect. The Queen is not above drama. After all, one particularly spicy dispatch describes a supposed Catholic uprising in Yorkshire, complete with flaming torches and midnight oaths. Elizabeth circles a section in red ink and writes, "Tell Cecil this sounds like poetry, not policy." Savage, you slip past guards who never look directly at you, down narrow halls padded with tapestries to muffle footsteps, through the privy chamber where a lady-in-waiting nods at you but only once, she knows. You're heading for the Queen's scribal nest. It's not in the great hall or council chamber. It's in a modest turret room near her personal wardrobes, more warm, high up, a place few ever see. Inside, stacks of letters, wax seals, ribbons, knives for slicing parchment, jars of powder for detecting invisible ink. It's equal parts post office and laboratory. Here, Elizabeth trains her most loyal messengers. She writes her own letters to foreign ambassadors, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in code, always with a twist that only she and her intended reader will understand. One famously contained a Shakespeare quote, 10 years before Shakespeare became Shakespeare. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth invented the line herself or had access to an early draft. And yes, it gets weirder. She kept decoy letters in a special box, messages with fake confessions, phony love affairs, or elaborate plots. That didn't exist. When these were intercepted, because they always were, they sowed confusion like wildfire. Once, an intercepted decoy letter caused a Spanish spy to denounce his own cousin, thinking the cousin was betraying him. Oops. Then there was the poison pen draw. Not actual poison, usually, but scathing, dangerous little notes, written not to inform, but to provoke. They might accuse a noble of infidelity or suggest a bishop is taking bribes. Sent anonymously, of course. Elizabeth called them her rattlers, because they shook cages. You sit at her desk, just for a moment, running your fingers over the delicate, cruel edge of statecraft. It's here that political manipulation becomes performance art. Remember Francis Walsingham? He might have been the spider, but Elizabeth spun the first strand of web. She even toyed with using marriage negotiations as traps. At one point, she sent love letters to 3 different suitors in 3 different courts in the same day. All were postmarked differently. All carried different handwriting. All had Elizabeth's seal. Only she knew what she had really written, or who it was meant for. The Queen plays a dangerous game, and sometimes she plays it alone. But not even Elizabeth can do it all. For some missions, she turns to a secret trio. Her nightbirds, they're not official. They don't exist in court records, but they appear in a letter buried in Walsingham's archive. Send the birds to Venice. The birds were women, trained in languages, music, conversation, and silent observation. Their job: to infiltrate salons, courts, and convents across Europe under the guise of nobility, or, more often, fallen nobility. The kind people gossip too. One bird, nicknamed Penny, seduced a Spanish envoy simply by dropping her glove. Another wren posed as a playwright's muse and leaked his verses to the French court, not for theft, but for coded correspondence. The real message hid inside the meter of the verse. Now that's high level, of course. No one can confirm these birds were real. Historians still argue whether the night birds were just a metaphor for Elizabeth's intelligent style, or if they were flesh and blood women who vanished when the work was done. You pause beside a fireplace where one letter curls into ash. The script, a confession from a nobleman who betrayed a Protestant haven in the Low Countries. The Queen's own hand signed his pardon, but the pardon was never delivered. Sometimes, mercy is just another delay tactic. Your final stop tonight, a heavy velvet curtain near the chapel, concealing a narrow window. From here, the Queen watches. Visitors arrive at court. She sees everything, which guards are twitchy, which ambassadors avoid eye contact, which ladies whisper too long in corners. It's not paranoia, it's instinct. She once remarked, "I do not want to make windows into men's souls," but secretly she built an entire palace of glass. You exhale, the candle flickers low. Elizabeth is still awake, quills scratching faintly behind you. Never know what she's writing, but tomorrow half the world might be reading it without even knowing it came from her. You sit with your back pressed against the cool stone wall of the antechamber, the hum of whispers bouncing through the labyrinth of Whitehall's corridors. Behind a thick oak door, the Privy Council meets, but that's not the room you're waiting for. You're listening through a walnut to the council, but to what's beneath them. The Under-Council, as Walsingham once called it, is less of an official body and more of a rotating group of informants, blackmailers and handlers who feed the top with what the top must never admit they need. It's where truth is diced into digestible chunks and served up as loyalty. And it's also where the spiders get burned. Tonight's agenda. Cleansing the web, you hear the name whispered, John Ballard. That curly-haired, priest-disguised traitor we brushed past earlier. A Jesuit trained in Reims, sent to London like a dagger in a velvet sleeve. But Ballard's no longer a problem. You helped see to that. Now it's time to talk about what happens next. How to bury him and expose him at the same time. Yes, you read that right, see. Once spies are caught, their usefulness doesn't always end. Sometimes the Queen's men use them again, this time as bait. Ballard's letters will be paraded around the courts of Europe, subtly tweaked to imply that anyone who ever dined with him was in league with treason. One draft of the letter even swaps the name Anthony Babington for Anthony Bacon, just to stir the pot among Francis Bacon's associates. Whoops, historians still argue whether that edit was a mistake or a masterstroke. It doesn't matter, the effect is the same. Uncertainty. Elizabeth's court thrives on suspicion. That's the trick, never prove guilt outright. Just let it linger. You're summoned at last, not by name, but by the flick of a tapestry. Behind it, a narrow, spiral staircase, descending into the heart of the Queen's administrative underworld. It smells of ink and old linen. Faint candlelight casts monstrous shadows. Down here, it's not about velvet robes or speeches, it's about ledgers, locks, and lies. At the bottom sits a woman, not what you expect a plain gown. Fingers stained from pigments, hair coiled under a modest cap. But she's not a servant. She's Mistress Clarendon. On paper, she oversees royal inventories. In reality, she balances the Queen's darkest books. She opens one. It's bound in black leather, edges singed. Inside, a list of every spy who has ever failed. Some are crossed out dead, disgraced, disappeared. But others remain open entries. Not yet punished, not yet. Revealed, she runs her finger down to a name you recognize. A nobleman who still smiles in court, still gifts the Queen roses on her birthday. But here, in the dark, he's already sentenced. Elizabeth is just waiting for the right moment. Mistress Clarendon doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. She hands you a pouch. Inside, 4 letters, 4 locations, and 1 vial of clear liquid with no label. Deliver, she says, but only 1. The rest are distractions. This is a game within the game. You ride out. Under darkness, no herald, no guards, just you, a nondescript horse, and 3 decoys designed to fail. The real letter is tucked into your boot, sealed with a red ribbon shaped like a serpent. It's going to a man named John Dee. Yes, that John Dee, mathematician, astronomer, occultist, former court advisor, rumored wizard, owner of what may be the world's largest mirror collection. The Queen still trusts him, sort of. He's been sent to Prague under the guise of pursuing alchemical research. In truth, he's monitoring Emperor Rudolph II, who's toying with the idea of siding with the Spanish. Dee's reports come back disguised as astrological predictions. It's all very cloak dash and dash star dash chart. But here's the twist. Elizabeth knows. Dee sometimes exaggerates, so she cross-checks his visions with those of another seer in court, a blind harpist who speaks only in rhymes. Historians still argue whether she was mad, prophetic, or just really into theatre. Meanwhile, the rest of Europe tries to decipher England's moves. A Spanish ambassador reports that the English Queen consults demons. A French envoy swears he saw her walk backwards during an eclipse. Both probably wrong, one probably drunk, but the myth builds. Elizabeth wants you to wonder. You reach Dee's safe house in a fog-drenched hamlet. He answers the door himself, beard, wild eyes to alert. For midnight, he takes the letter, sniffs it, tastes the wax why, and smiles. It begins, he whispers. You don't ask what, you just ride away. Back in London, word spreads. An envoy from the Scottish court has vanished. No blood, no struggle, just gone. Some say he defected. Others whisper he was eaten by the stones. You suspect the truth is far more boring and far more deliberate. Clarendon's book gets a new name, crossed out. Another line added below it, compromised. 1. By 1, the web shrinks, by force, but by design. Spies are never truly caught. They're allowed to slip through. Once they've served their purpose, you return to the palace at dawn, exhausted, mud-spattered, your hands still smelling of candle wax and ink. Elizabeth is already awake, standing by a window, looking east. Did he receive it? She asks. Without turning, you nod. Good, she murmurs. Let the stars think they're leading us. Then she vanishes into shadow as the first rays of sunlight pierce the sky. The frost on the Thames crunches under your boots as you step onto the old London Bridge, the river below sluggish and glazed with ice. Winter has made the city brittle. Chimneys cough thin smoke into a pale sky, and even the pigeons look cold. Tonight, your mission is not in a palace or a tavern. It's in a place far more dangerous, a house of whispers. The house doesn't look like Moocher. Crumbling townhouse leaning slightly toward the street, with green shutters that never seem to open. But if you knock 3 times and wait for 2, a latch clicks, and the world shifts from cold to heat. You step inside. The air smells of wax and tallow, mingled with wet wool and the faint metallic bite of iron keys. This is an intelligent safe house, one of half a dozen scattered across London. And right now, it's buzzing. 6 men and women sit around a long oak table. The grain scarred with knife marks and candle drips. Maps of Europe are spread across it. Tiny pins marking troop movements, ports, and the occasional question mark, where no one yet knows what's brewing. Beside the maps, a pile of letters, some with broken seals, some still warm from a courier's pocket. The mood, tense, because news has arrived from France. Catholic leagues are plotting to overthrow Henry III, and if that domino falls, Spain will gain another friend. England might be looking at round 2 of the nightmare you barely survived with the Armada. 1. Courier clears his throat. Intercept from Reims, he says, laying out a single sheet. Mentions a black bear. The room freezes. That's a code name, but whose? Here's the thing about Elizabeth's spy network. It's brilliant, but it's not omniscient. Codes shift constantly, ciphers change like the wind, and double agents enjoy inventing phantom threats. Historians still argue whether the Black Bear was a real assassin or just a ghost in the paperwork. You lean closer. The handwriting on the intercepted letter is thin, nervous, and slightly smudged as if the writer had been glancing over his shoulder. The message claims the Black Bear will strike before May Day and that the chain will break. Everyone at the table knows what that might mean. A plan to kill the Queen. The safe house isn't just for decoding letters. It's also for vetting spies. Across the room, a hooded man kneels with his hands tied, flanked by 2 guards. He's shaking, which could mean guilt or cold or that he just knows what happens to traitors in Elizabeth's England. You approach. He looks up at you with wide, bloodshot eyes. I'm loyal, he stammers. I only took the coin to feed my family. Classic line. Everyone says that. But then he says something different. I never meant for the bishop to die. There it is. The guards glance at each other. There hadn't been a confirmed plot against a bishop, not publicly, but the network had been chasing a rumor about a poisoning in York. His slip confirms the story before the formal interrogation even begins. The Queen's men are good at this, making silence feel heavier than any threat. You watch the prisoner break himself with his own words. By dawn, the safe house table is littered with fragments of his confession, names, locations, 3 meeting spots, and 1 tavern that you personally swear never to drink in again. Then comes the part you didn't expect. One of Walsingham's successors, because yes, the old spymaster is aging now, his beard more white than black slides, a small silver bell across the table to you. Your turn, he says. You're sent to shadow a meeting in the crypt of St. Olave's Church. where the air is colder than outside, and the faint smell of dust and bone makes you feel like someone's already writing your epitaph. 2 men are there. One is a messenger you've never seen. The other, a familiar face from court laughing, charming. A man who once handed the Queen a rose in front of 50 witnesses, and tonight he's whispering treason under a stone ceiling. He speaks of letters to Spain, of promises to betray shipping routes. Then he says it. The bear will bite. Your stomach twists. He's involved. You back away before they see you, heart pounding against your ribs. Back at the safe house, the news will trigger an avalanche of action, arrests, interrogations, silent disappearances, and sure enough, the next week, a coach rattles quietly to the tower in the dead of night. No trumpet, no crowd, just one man delivered to stone walls and iron bars. But here's the funny part. No announcement ever comes. No trial. The Queen simply lets him vanish. A ghost in the records, erased as cleanly as chalk in the rain. That's Elizabeth's favorite trick. Now sometimes punishment is not spectacle. It's the opposite. Make the traitor invisible. Let his allies wonder what happened. Let fear do the talking. The black bear, he never roars. Or maybe he does, and the roar is swallowed whole by the river and the frost and the whisper of pages burning in safe houses all over London. You stand just outside Richmond Palace, boots half sunk in the soft soil of a riverside garden that once shimmered with tulips and silent gossip. It's a grey day fitting. The man who built England's shadow empire now coughs behind heavy drapes. His fingers too thin to grip the quill that once signed away lives with a flick. And yet, his mind razor sharp even now remains the most dangerous weapon in the kingdom here on orders. Not from the Queen, but from the network. Because Walsingham wants one last whisper shared before his eyes close for good. You pass the guards. Inside, the chamber is stuffy with rosemary and vinegar, the Elizabethan cure-all. A bowl of soot-black broth sits untouched beside the bed. He's too far gone to care for it. What he wants is to talk. You again, he says, recognizing you through the film over his eyes, still walking between shadows and sunlight. I see, you nod, not trusting your voice. He gestures weakly. A folded letter waits on the windowsill, beside a dry feather quill and a ring with a cracked sapphire. Take it to her, he says, but not now, after I'm gone. You reach for it, but he grips your wrist with surprising strength. Read it, know what we've done, and what we've become. So you do. The letter isn't just a farewell. It's a confession and a warning. Walsingham writes about the corruption of loyalty, the twisting of trust, and the creeping rot of suspicion that poisons even victories. We created a kingdom too paranoid to sleep, he writes. We won, with secrets, but lost our innocence. Historians still argue whether Walsingham regretted his life's work. Some believe he died proud. Others point to that letter ever officially entered into any archive as evidence of deep, silent remorse. The day after his death, bells toll across London, but there is no grand funeral. The Queen offers no speech. Instead, his papers vanish. His personal cipher books are burned. The ring with the cracked sapphire. You keep that, because someone has to remember, and someone has to continue without Walsingham. The network does not collapse. It adapts. Elizabeth replaces him, though no one quite fills his seat. Cecil's son Robert takes on the mantle of spymaster, though with less fire and more polish. He builds upon the old code systems and recruits men with softer shoes and even softer tongues. The Queen, for her part, seems unchanged. But you know better. Her eyes linger longer on strangers. Her questions cut deeper, and she sleeps fewer hours each night. You see it in her face. The weight of surviving so many betrayals. The knowledge that each smile might hide a knife, because by now the network has become more than defense, it's a habit. A reflex, a mirror always turned toward the door. Even her ladies-in-waiting begin reporting to the intelligence office. Servants whisper about portraits that tilt the wrong way and carpets that conceal floorboards with compartments. Some of it's nonsense, but not all. You once find a locket in a palace corridor, the clasp holding a pin no longer than your thumbnail tipped with belladonna, a fashionable trinket turned into death. No one ever claims it. Foreign embassies become nests of smoke and doublespeak. You attend a dinner hosted by the French ambassador, where 5 of the 16 guests are informants from different nations. No one eats the oysters. No one drinks from a goblet they didn't see poured. The line between enemy and ally vanishes. You begin watching your own shadow more than anyone else's. One day, a message arrives by pigeon from Scotland. It's brief, just 3 words. The ashes stir. It's code. You follow its trail to an abandoned farmhouse outside York, where 3 men plan to kidnap the Archbishop of Canterbury. They never leave the farmhouse. Later, by firelight, you wonder, was the plot real or just bait? A ghost invented to justify a sweep of suspected Catholics. The spy network you serve now acts on echoes. Sometimes you burn a man's house based on a smudge of wax and a rumor. Sometimes you're right, sometimes not, and still you continue. Elizabeth knows she cannot rule by charm forever. The poets still praise her, but fewer with conviction. The nobility grows restless, and even her most loyal courtiers know the clock is ticking. So she doubles down on secrecy. She finances cryptography schools. She orders astrological charts on suspicious births. She has the floors of her council chambers sanded to better track footsteps. Even Shakespeare is suspected of subtle, seditious leanings after Richard II performs a little too close to real politics. You attend the performance, and yes, you feel it tooth a ripple in the crowd as the actor deposed King Hans. Over his crown, you spot 3 of your own agents in the audience, 2 of them clenching daggers beneath their cloaks. Afterward, you report, no active threat, but the mood is cracked. That becomes your new refrain, cracked like the Queen's confidence, like the stained glass in her private chapel, warped by years of heat, like your own memories, flickering between the ideals you swore to defend and the men you silenced defending them. As Elizabeth ages, the court changes. Younger nobles circle like polite sharks, and still the Queen outplays them, smiling sweetly, asking after their mothers while your team listens from behind. Embroidered curtains, you begin to suspect she doesn't need the network anymore, because now she is the network. Every raised eyebrow, every gift refused, every calculated silence. The Virgin Queen plays her role so well, it's no longer a performance. It's who she is, and by the time she's an old woman in pearl-draped gowns and trembling hands, her enemies have learned something. Cruel and true, she outlived them all, one whisper at a time. The light in Elizabeth's chamber is different, now softer, dustier, a kind of fading gold that doesn't so much illuminate as it does remember. You're seated in the far corner, barely noticed among the embroidered cushions and ticking clocks. She's older now, frailer, but those eyes, still flint. The Queen no longer walks the corridors with that lioness stride. Her steps are hesitant, her voice occasionally trembles, and the ornate ruff around her neck feels less like armor and more like scaffolding. But her mind remains razor-sharp. She calls you closer with a crooked finger. There's no one else in the room. She prefers it that way these days. Even her most loyal ladies-in-waiting are dismissed when you arrive. You've always been the quiet one, she murmurs. Quiet people know how to listen and survive. You nod. You've spent 3 decades listening, surviving, serving the crown from the silence. But you also know why she summoned you now. She's dying. No one says it out loud, of course. Elizabeth won't allow it. Her makeup is thicker, her cheeks drawn into rouge-painted hollows, her wig braided with pearls so heavy they tug at her temples. A living statue, a ghost clinging to her throne. And yet she remembers everything. She recalls the Babington Plot with a smirk. He thought ciphers could save him, she whispers, as if I didn't already know every word before he wrote. She recalls Walsingham's death, Cecil's sun rising, letters burned, enemies vanished. But then her tone shifts, softer, wistful. We've built something too clever to ever destroy, she says. Even now, it watches me. You hesitate. Do you mean the network, Your Majesty? Her laugh is dry as parchment. I mean you, because by now you're not just part of the web. You are the web, the last thread, the original hand, the one who saw it all, and that's why she has one final command. It's not a war to wage or a spy to follow. It's a name. Just a name, a young woman, not a noble, not a diplomat, a nobody, living outside Oxford, teaching languages. She's never met the Queen. Elizabeth tells you, she's the last gift I leave England. Confused, you dig deeper after you leave the chamber. You follow threads. You uncover that this girl, this quiet scholar, has translated half of work by age 17, has no interest in court, and yet somehow her letters have been intercepted. They contain subtle codes, phrases too well structured to be accidental. You realize the truth. She's the beginning of the next generation. Elizabeth has been grooming her quietly, anonymously, through agents who never revealed their true allegiance. She's passing the torch not to a courtier, but to a ghost, one who understands languages, mirrors, silence. The spy network won't die with Elizabeth. It'll mutate, slip into the new world. Historians still debate whether Elizabeth personally trained a successor to her. Intelligence apparatus. There's no formal document, no seal of approval, just rumors, stories, a paper trail burnt at both ends. But you? No, because on the morning of Elizabeth's death, you're there. It's quiet. No fanfare, just a slow exhale, and then silence. You remove the last piece of jewelry from her cold hand. A ring shaped like a serpent biting its own tail. No gem, just silver, endless. It's a symbol, endings and beginnings. That night, the network meets in secret for the last time under the Tudor reign. No toasts, no eulogies, just names passed forward. Safe houses rekeyed, ledgers inked. You deliver the ring dot to the girl near Oxford. She says nothing, only slips it on her finger and vanishes. The legacy of Elizabeth's spy network doesn't end in a blaze. It doesn't fade into myth. It becomes something subtler, a whisper beneath every throne, a lesson in every nation's intelligence school. It teaches the world that espionage is not about the blade, it's about the glance, the hesitation, the silence before the storm, And you retire well, as much as someone like you ever can. You walk the moors sometimes. People think you're just an old courtier, maybe a minor noble. No one suspects that the fate of England, once rested in your hands, occasionally still does. You still receive the occasional note. No signature, just the hour watches. You smile, because in the end, Elizabeth I didn't just save her kingdom from invasion. She didn't just outmaneuver popes and kings. She redefined what it meant to see to be everywhere and nowhere, to survive, not through force, but through finesse. And thanks to you and the others who came after, her legacy will outlive every empire that ever tried to end hers, one secret at a time. So now your feet are up, your pillow cool, and the shadows no longer whisper like they did in Elizabeth's court. The story's over, but its echoes linger, don't they? You can still feel the click of heels down palace corridors, the soft rustle of velvet curtains concealing hidden eyes, the coded notes tucked into fruit baskets, the quiet ache of never truly knowing who was watching whom. But let all that drift now. Imagine, instead, the soft hush of parchment in a library after hours, the golden light of a candle that won't flicker, no matter how long the night stretches. You're no longer in the war rooms. You're not hiding messages in cufflinks or memorizing safe phrases. You're here, safe history. After all, can't touch you tonight, so let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the stories settle gently behind your eyes. Maybe you're lying in a castle chamber, your self-stone walls, heavy quilts, a breeze curling under the door. Or maybe you're just you, curled up with the quiet comfort of knowing you made it through, and whether you were the watcher, the whisperer, or the one who walked away, you survived Elizabeth's real-life Game of Thrones. Now rest, dear listener. The secrets can wait until morning.